At 0200 hours local time, 3 United States Navy vessels went dark in the Gulf of Oman. A total, instantaneous, and catastrophic failure of all electronics. The Pentagon is calling it a cascading systems failure. But was this an unprecedented naval accident? Or has Iran just unveiled a terrifying new weapon that can render an entire U.S. carrier strike group electronically blind, deaf, and defenseless? The incident began with a single vessel, the USS Sirocco, Patrol Craft No. 6. A Cyclone-class patrol ship on a routine freedom of navigation exercise. One moment, its bridge was a calm sea of green and blue from its various displays. The next, it was plunged into absolute darkness and silence. Navigation went dead. Communications were severed. The surface search radar, the eyes of the ship, was a blank, useless screen. Down in the Combat Information Center, sailors were left staring at dead consoles. Even the ship's internal chronometers froze. It was as if time itself had stopped for the Sirocco. This was not a power failure. The ship's engines were still running. Its generators were still producing power. But that power was going nowhere. Something had isolated the engines from every system they were meant to feed. Seconds later, frantic, garbled reports came in from 2 other nearby vessels before they, too, fell silent. 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the tip of America's naval spear, had suffered the exact same fate. 3 ships, adrift and blind. An information black hole had just opened in one of the most strategically vital waterways on the planet. The official statement from the Department of Defense was swift and deliberately vague. It cited a potential software glitch in a newly updated joint engagement network, leading to a cascading systems failure. They spoke of saltwater corrosion and unexpected power surges. It was a narrative designed to calm, to reassure, to project an image of control over a technical problem. But behind the scenes, in the shielded intelligence centers of Fort Meade and the National Reconnaissance Office, a completely different story was emerging. A story pieced together from fragments of intercepted data and the silent gaze of orbiting satellites. Just moments before the USS Sirocco went dark, a spy satellite passing over the region registered a massive, anomalous energy spike. The source was a known Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps research and development facility on the Iranian coast, near the port of Chabahar. It wasn't a thermal bloom from a missile launch. It wasn't a seismic event. It was a directed, high-energy pulse of electromagnetic radiation, lasting for less than a microsecond. It was pointed directly at the coordinates of the U.S. Naval flotilla. Simultaneously, signals intelligence units picked up a burst of encrypted chatter from the IRGC base. The fragmentary translation spoke of target saturation, successful field test, and system paralysis. This was no accident. This was a deliberate, calculated, and terrifyingly successful military experiment. The Pentagon's cascading systems failure was, in reality, a direct hit. What the intelligence community now fears is that Iran has achieved a monumental breakthrough in asymmetric warfare. They have deployed a tactical, non-nuclear, electromagnetic pulse weapon, or NEMP. This is not the Cold War fantasy of a nuclear bomb detonating in the upper atmosphere and wiping out a continent's power grid. This is something far more precise, and in a naval context far more dangerous. But did they develop this capability alone? The answer appears to be no. New intelligence, arriving within the last 12 hours, has added a deeply alarming new player to this equation. 3 days before the incident, the Russian naval vessel Akademik Padishin was tracked leaving the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. While officially designated a replenishment oiler, the Pokushin is a known Russian signals intelligence and electronic warfare platform, bristling with specialized antennas and sensor arrays. Is it a coincidence that one of Russia's most advanced spy ships was present just before Iran demonstrated a game-changing electronic warfare capability? Or are we witnessing the battlefield debut of a Russo-Iranian joint project, specifically designed to neutralize America's primary tool of global power projection, the aircraft carrier? To understand the threat, one must understand the weapon. A tactical NEMP functions like a microwave cannon. It uses a device, likely a flux compression generator, to create an incredibly powerful, focused beam of microwave energy. This beam doesn't explode like a bomb. It travels at the speed of light and washes over its target. To unhardened electronics, this pulse is an instantaneous death sentence. It induces massive voltage spikes in any conductive material wiring, antennas, circuit boards. Microchips are fried. Processors are wiped. Data links are severed. It is the electronic equivalent of a massive cerebral hemorrhage. It doesn't sink the ship with a kinetic impact. It kills its nervous system instantly. Modern warships, for all their armor and firepower, have a critical vulnerability. They are, in essence, floating supercomputers. The AEGIS combat system, the heart of an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, relies on a network of dozens of advanced computers and millions of lines of code to track and engage hundreds of targets simultaneously. Every system, from the Phalanx close-in weapon system to the GPS navigation and the encrypted communications network, is dependent on fragile microelectronics. Hardening exists to protect against the peripheral effects of a distant nuclear blast. But the focused, directed energy of a tactical NEMP is a completely different and potentially overwhelming threat. Iran didn't just turn off the lights on 3 ships. They may have found the kill switch for 21st century naval power. The strategic implications are staggering. Forget 3 small ships. Picture the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group entering the Strait of Hormuz. The carrier, 2 cruisers, a squadron of destroyers, and a nuclear submarine. Over 12,000 personnel, the single greatest concentration of military power on Earth. A $10 billion symbol of American supremacy. Now, imagine a series of hidden, land-based NEMP generators firing in sequence from the Iranian coast. The pulse is invisible. It is silent. It arrives with no warning. The first to go is the E-2 Hawkeye, the carrier's airborne early warning and control aircraft. Its massive radar dome is a perfect antenna for the EMP, and its systems are instantly fried. The eyes of the fleet are gone. Then the pulse washes over the surface ships. On the bridge of the Lincoln, every screen goes dead. The AEGIS cruisers, tasked with protecting the fleet with a shield of missiles, go electronically blind. Their advanced SPY-1 radars are useless. On the flight deck of the carrier, the F-35 multi-role fighters are suddenly inert. Their fly-by-wire systems are unresponsive. The electromagnetic catapults that launch them are offline. The carrier is no longer an aircraft carrier. It is a $10 billion floating prison for some of the world's most advanced, and now useless, aircraft. The entire strike group, the mailed fist of the United States, is rendered impotent in less than a second. It is a fleet of ghost ships, engines running but brains dead, adrift in one of the world's most contested choke points. Defenseless. This is the threat that is keeping admirals at the Pentagon awake tonight. The successful test on the USS Sirocco and its escorts has proven the concept. The question is no longer if Iran has this weapon, but how many they have, and what their immediate intentions are. Which brings us back to the Gulf of Oman. Right now, the USS Sirocco and the 2 destroyers are still dead in the water. Rescue and recovery operations are being mounted from the U.S. naval base in Bahrain, but they are proceeding with extreme caution. They are sailing into a region where the known rules of naval warfare may have just been rewritten, and a new piece of disturbing intelligence has just come in. Thermal imaging from a potassium hydride 11 reconnaissance satellite has detected a flurry of activity along the Iranian coastline, not from the major naval bases, but from small, hidden IRGC ports. Dozens of small, high-speed heat signatures have detached from the coast. They are swarming, and they are all converging on a single point in the middle of the Gulf, the exact location of the 3 disabled American warships. This is a classic Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps naval tactic, the swarm. Fast, agile, and numerous, these Bogomar-class speedboats are designed to overwhelm a technologically superior foe through sheer numbers. At the Pentagon, the initial assessment was grim but expected. A finishing blow. The boats would get within range and unleash a barrage of anti-ship missiles and rocket-propelled grenades, sinking the helpless American vessels and creating a massive international incident. But then, something strange happened. Or rather, didn't happen. The boats closed to 10 kilometers, then 5, then 2. They were well within the lethal range of their weapons. Yet not a single missile left its rail. The swarm wasn't positioning for a kill shot. It was constricting, forming a tight perimeter, treating the $3 billion warships less like targets and more like a prize to be cornered. The horrifying realization dawned on analysts at CENTCOM. This wasn't an execution. It was an abduction. They were preparing to board and capture United States Navy warships. The question is, why? Why risk a bloody, close-quarters battle to seize vessels that are, electronically speaking, just hunks of dead steel? What could possibly be worth such a gamble? The answer lies not in what the NEMP weapon destroyed, but in what it may have deliberately left intact. While the ship's active systems, its radar, its communications, its weapons control were fried, the core data storage systems may be perfectly preserved. Think of it like a computer that's been violently unplugged. The screen is dark. The keyboard is useless. But the information on the hard drive is still there, and the information on those drives is arguably the most valuable military secret in the world. The complete source code for the AEGIS combat system, the cryptographic keys for the entire U.S. Navy's secure communications network, the operational parameters of the SPY-1 radar, the complete electronic warfare library, containing the weaknesses of every known enemy aircraft and missile. Getting access to this data wouldn't just be an intelligence failure for the United States. It would be a catastrophe. It would give Iran and its Russian partners a skeleton key to the entire American naval defense network. They could develop jammers that make AEGIS blind. They could develop missiles that the system cannot track. They could potentially even listen in on the most secure communications of the U.S. military. They aren't trying to sink 3 ships. They are trying to sink the technological superiority of the entire U.S. Navy. But there's another, even more terrifying possibility being considered in the deepest recesses of the Pentagon. What if the goal isn't just data theft? What if the NEMP was calibrated with surgical precision, not to permanently destroy the ship's electronics, but to temporarily disable them, a forced shutdown, leaving the core operating system vulnerable to a hostile takeover? Could they be attempting to board the ships, physically connect to their internal networks, and reboot the systems with their own malicious code, turning a U.S. destroyer into a Trojan horse, a ghost ship operated by the enemy, floating silently in the fleet's midst? It's a chilling thought. But in this new era of warfare, it is no longer the stuff of science fiction. The battle for the Sirocco and its escorts is no longer about salvage. It's a race against time to prevent the greatest technological heist in military history. But for the crew of the USS McFall, and the technological secrets they guarded, time had just run out. On the bridge of the approaching USS Gettysburg, the tactical reality was a waking nightmare. They had arrived, but they were too late to prevent the boarding. The McFall was compromised. Captain Eva Rostova stared at the tactical display, her ship's formidable arsenal represented by glowing icons, all useless. Firing on the McFall to clear the decks meant firing on American sailors, but letting the boarders consolidate their position meant losing the ship and the priceless data within. She was faced with an impossible choice, a decision no commander ever wants to make. Then, a voice, broken and distorted by static, crackled over the emergency channel. It was the captain of the McFall. His words were strained, punctuated by the sound of gunfire in the background. Gettysburg, this is McFall Actual. We are compromised. I say again, we are compromised. They're breaking into the server room. We can't let them have it. A pause, a deep breath. Initiate contingency. Scimitar. There was a moment of stunned silence on the Gettysburg's bridge. Contingency Scimitar, a protocol that existed more in theory than practice. A last, desperate resort. It was the command for the crew to scuttle their own ship, to use its own munitions and fuel to create a catastrophic explosion, denying the prize to the enemy at the cost of their own lives. Before Captain Rostova could even respond, the sky lit up. The blast wave tore through the IRGC flotilla at point-blank range. Speedboats were vaporized instantly. Others were capsized or torn to shreds by the concussive force. The carefully constructed swarm was broken, shattered, and sent into a panicked retreat. The sacrifice of the McFall and its crew had worked. The boarding party was annihilated, the ship was unsalvageable, and the AEGIS source code was now just vaporized atoms at the bottom of the Gulf. In the dawn's early light, the scene was one of grim resolution. The IRGC threat had vanished. The surviving 2 American warships, though still disabled, were now being secured by U.S. forces. The data was safe, but the price was a U.S. destroyer and its entire crew, a permanent scar on the waters of the Gulf and on the psyche of the U.S. Navy. The battle for the USS Sirocco was over, but the war it signaled had only just begun. It was a new kind of conflict, a shadow war fought in server rooms and across satellite links, where a line of code could be more devastating than a missile, and where the front line could be anywhere on Earth. The age of conventional naval supremacy was over. The age of techno-warfare is here. To understand the weapons, the tactics, and the monumental stakes of this new global conflict, you need to be on the front line of information. To see what's coming before it arrives, subscribe to Breaking_the_Front.